Hello everyone, Mrs. Bradley here. I'm back to read you a story, and the story I've chosen to read to you today is called Very Little Cinderella, and it's a version of Cinderella that I'm not sure you would have heard of. I really love this book because of the illustrations, and one of the things that they have just as you open the book is a map. Some of the places in this map are places you may have heard of, like deep dark woods, very little Hansel and Gretel's house, very little prince's house, very little prince's palace. Ooh, there's a party tonight. Very little Cinderella's house, babysitter needed quick. Very little Cinderella was cleaning the house. "I clean it all up," she said. She cleaned the floor. She cleaned the walls. She cleaned the table. Soon, everything was looking very clean. The ugly sisters crashed in. "Very little Cinderella," they said, "can you please clean up?" "No," said very little Cinderella. "Cleaning all done." "But," said the ugly sisters. "No," said very little Cinderella. "Cleaning all done. Now I have biscuit." Suddenly, the fairy godmother appeared. "What's she?" said very little Cinderella. "I'm the babysitter," said the fairy godmother. "You see," said the ugly sisters, "we're off to a party now." "I go too," said very little Cinderella. No," said the ugly sisters, "just us." "But I do go," said very little Cinderella. "We'll be back just after midnight," said the ugly sisters. "Be good, sleep tight." And off they went, quickly. Can you see? They're going to a party. Very little Cinderella was very upset. "It's not fair," she wailed. "I not stay here. I want to go too." The fairy godmother took a very deep breath. "Why don't we have a snack?" she said. "We can clean all this up." Then the fairy godmother whispered, "Listen, why don't we go to the party too? You'll need a very special dress." "I like that," said very little Cinderella. "I want my blue dress." "Well, it must be special," said the fairy godmother. "What about a shiny dress, a bright dress, a tiny dress, a tight dress, a puffy, fluffy, cosy, rosy, dreamy, creamy white dress, a sweet dress, a curly dress, a neat dress, a pearly dress, a frilly, silly, crazy, daisy, flashy, splashy, twirly dress? Or what about," said the fairy godmother with one last effort, "a silver dress?" "I want my blue dress," said very little Cinderella firmly. "And my stripy hat, and my froggy coat, and my yellow boots." She knows what she wants. "Well, you should at least go in a coach. I can magic you one from these rats and this pumpkin," said the fairy godmother. "Oh no," said very little Cinderella. "I go on my big scooter." So they went to the party on the big blue scooter. We must leave at midnight, said the fairy godmother. Very little Cinderella ran into the party. I do dancing, she said. She leapt and she jumped and she hopped and she bumped. She swished and she swirled, she swooshed and she twirled. She found a friend and another and another. But then the clock struck 12. It's midnight. Come on, time to go home, said the fairy godmother. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh no, said very little Cinderella. I stay here. I do more dancing. And then I lost my yellow boot. I'll magic you some new boots, said the fairy godmother, but we have to go now. She took very little Cinderella home on the big blue scooter. I need my yellow boot. The next day, very little Cinderella was feeling very sad. The ugly sisters tried a biscuit. They tried a balloon. The fairy godmother tried a big basket of boots. My bestest boot is all gone, said very little Cinderella. Just then there was a knock on the door. There stood very little Prince with his mummy. Is this your boot? He said. It's a very nice boot. My best boot, said very little Cinderella. And she gave the boot a big hug. Then very little Cinderella noticed something. Oh, she said. You've got boots too. Oh, yes, said very little Prince. I've got spots all over mine. Shall we have a try on? Said very little Cinderella. So very little Cinderella tried on the very little Prince's boot. The very little Prince tried on very little Cinderella's boot. It fits me, they said. And very little Cinderella and very little Prince had a play date. They laughed and they chased, they wrestled and they raced. And they both played happily ever after. I really hope you enjoyed that story. I love reading this, especially at bedtime. Have you got a favourite book that you like to read? What one do you like?
This one and this one.
Oh yeah, I quite like the shiny dress. That's cool.
I quite like this one, 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 this one.
Yeah, I can see lots of people in there. Who can you spot?
You're Cinderella and the ugly sisters and that man and the fairy godmother.
Some really good counting going on, and even Daisy the cat was listening. I really hope you enjoyed Very Little Cinderella.